Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. When people suggest that my NDE might have been just a vivid dream, I tell them that I initially thought the same. The experience was so intense and extraordinarily frightening that it far exceeded the level of fear I have encountered in my most terrifying nightmares, and for this reason alone, I wasn't quick to dismiss it as imaginary. Whether or not it was a dream is not central in my decision to share this story with you, the listener, but rather, it is the profoundly transformative impact the NDE has had on my life that compels me to do so. I was having a normal morning, dreaming on the day of my NDE, when suddenly, without warning, the dream changed, and I found myself in a dark place. In the darkness, I began to hear the screams of a multitude of people, while towering flames surrounded me. As a mere witness to the torment of those afflicted souls in that realm of harassment and torture, I knew that I wasn't dead but was instead receiving a warning to share with others. As I wandered the realm of the damned, the oppressed souls consigned to the netherworld would run towards me, eager to share their stories of why and how they ended up in that place, in their desire to warn mankind. What pitfalls of habit or the weaknesses of character they wanted to warn mankind about, depended on the pattern of their existence during their lifetime on Earth. I met people who most of us would consider to be successful people during their lifetimes in the sections of hell to which people guilty of the same damning sin were interned. In one such quarter, I spoke with those whom society categorized as good people but who didn't live a prayerful life. Even though the flames only reached waist high in that region of the underworld, the souls cloistered in that region still experienced agonizing torture as the flames tore at their flesh repeatedly. As I explored the nether regions of the abyss where the flames towered above me, I was stopped by a soul who explained to me that he was a farmer who owned many slaves during his lifetime, thus revealing that I was in a section of hell that was dedicated to people who were brazenly racist towards others. As I observed the souls in the depths of the abyss, I noticed that among the many plantation owners were some who had been prominent leaders of the Black Power movement. Baby, tell people that color doesn't matter. I wasted my whole life using the chant of white supremacy to my advantage, the soul explained. Thank you. I will, I replied before continuing with my exploration. I then happened upon a dungeon in the deepest recesses of the inferno, filled with men who had once been rich CEOs, business moguls, merchants, and other wealthy individuals, those who had chased after money their entire lives. Those souls explained to me that they had once been wealthy businessmen who were immoral and showed no empathy for others, prioritizing money and material possessions above all else. On the day of their judgment before God, they tried to impress him by bargaining with their accolades, by calling attention to the illustrious families to which they belonged, the companies they owned, and the wealth they amassed. I do not care about any of that. Go away, I never knew you, God would say each time, despite their efforts to convince him. Money does not matter because you cannot bargain your way out of this place, and the rich are judged in the same way the poor are judged, one soul warned. Taking their message to heart, I thanked those souls before continuing on. As I explored the various regions of the realm of perdition, I came upon a section populated by those who, during their lives, found it difficult to forgive others. In that section, the damned told me that their inability to forgive was the reason for their sentence and warned me of the dangers of holding on to grudges. I thanked those souls before entering a region where I encountered celebrities and historical figures. Within that region, a soul encircled by a wall of flame caught my attention. As I approached him, I could see, even through the pervasive gloom, that it was the soul of the man who was once known as John Lennon. In his suffering, he cursed and denounced God, revealing just how angry a person he really was. In a fit of anger, he blamed God for his predicament and accused him of unjustly condemning souls to eternal torture without giving them adequate warning. He explained to me that the part of hell he was incarcerated within was the region where Hollywood musicians were confined. As I looked around that section of hell, I recognized other famous Hollywood stars, one of which was Michael Jackson. My heart sank upon seeing the anguished expression born on the face of a man who appeared to be about 50 years old. Michael didn't say anything to me, but I could tell by his pained expression that he was in the throes of deep agony, despair, and remorse over his past. Even though I sympathized with his plight and the plight of the other famous musicians in that part of the abyss, there was nothing I could do to help them. It seemed that hell was the price those who sell their souls to the devil for fame and fortune must pay. Just when I thought I had seen everything that there was to see, After leaving the sequestrate of Hades dedicated to famous musicians, I entered into a region in which a very wide opening in the ground caught my attention. As I looked into the pit, I could hear the groans of the horde of souls encaged within, some of whom were clinging to the steep escarpment. I watched as numerous anguished souls attempted to climb out of the deep chasm, most of whom were unsuccessful, and those who managed to escape the pit were quickly thrown back in by demons. From the edge of the opening, I looked into the chasm to notice at its depths a shelf that formed a large area of land. In the middle of that shelf, I noticed a smaller hole, and I was able to see how the chasm continued downward from that opening. I was watching as people tried to climb out of that part of the chasm when I noticed a man standing at the foot of it, observing those climbing upward. The man noticed me looking at him, and when he looked up at me, I saw that the man was in fact Adolf Hitler. Upon seeing him, it occurred to me that the trench, the shelf, and that zone in hell were dedicated to dictators and evil leaders. As Adolf looked up at me, he didn't say a word but regarded me with his characteristically stern demeanor. He then turned away from me to resume his vigil, making no attempt to help them in any way. It was then that I started looking for a way out of hell. As I searched for an exit, the most recent entrance fell from above in droves. Suddenly, I found myself not in hell, but rather in a large white room that I recognized as the Room of Judgment. In that vestibule between realms, I noticed an opening in the ceiling where the light of heaven was shining through, and an opening in the floor from which flames were rising. I observed that while the opening in the ceiling was shrinking in diameter, the opening in the floor was widening, making me realize that while fewer souls were reaching heaven, ever greater numbers were being damned to hell. At the moment of my epiphany, I woke up, petrified by what I had just experienced. My experience not only impelled me to live my life more purposefully and prayerfully, but also led me to regularly pray to Jesus and God for help in purifying my heart so that I may one day ascend to heaven.